Hello there, this is L24 World News Program. I'm Abdurrahim Kashoandos, and this is the headlines. Supporters of powerful Iraqi cleric Muqtada Sadr occupied the country's parliament on Saturday with no plan to leave, deepening a months-long political standoff. While dozens of people have been dying and going missing in ongoing flash floods across Iran, survivors confronted President Ibrahim Raisi as he was visiting affected areas. In the face of the Russian advance, Ukrainian president issues the order of a mandatory evacuation of our troops and civilians in Donetsk, frontline the east for the Slavic country. A Chinese booster rocket made an uncontrolled return to Earth on Saturday, leading US officials to chide Beijing for not sharing information. Hello again and welcome. Those were today's top stories. For the second time in a span of 3 days, Iraqi protesters breached the parliament in condemnation of the current situation in the parliament in the forming a new government. Protesters and followers of the Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadr have shown their support for him as they express their wrath against the situation. Osama Yadi tackled the story in this report.
For the second time in a week, supporters of Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadr breached Iraq's parliament on Saturday to protest the government formation efforts led by Iran-backed groups. The breach barred an expected parliament session from taking place, and there were no lawmakers in the hall. It was the second time in the span of 3 days that the cleric ordered his followers to stage a sit-in in the Green Zone, the district housing official buildings and foreign embassies.
We entered the parliament building for the third time to root out the corrupt political parties and militias. We are here to fix Iraq and get it back to its position by the word of people and with God's blessing and our leader, Muqtada Sadr.
Outside the parliament's walls, supporters of populist Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadr scaled barricades and moved further into heavily fortified Baghdad's Green Zone area. Hundreds marched through the streets waving flags and collectively bringing down or scaling concrete barriers. Speaking in Baghdad hours after the breach of parliament, Iraq's caretaker Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi encouraged political blocs to sit down and negotiate and reach an understanding for the sake of Iraq and Iraqi people.
It's a very difficult time. It's the bitter truth, unfortunately. We all have to cooperate and stand together so we do not push ourselves into the abyss. We have to judge by our minds, our consciousness, and our sentiments and stick to Iraq and the Iraqis, not petty interests. Our nation is eager for life, and it is not favoring strife, blood fighting, revenge, and rivalry, and it is not favoring hostility or hatred. They are looking for a future that is equal to the size of sacrifices and the struggle they have gone through. Therefore, the political blocs must sit down and negotiate and reach an understanding for the sake of Iraq and the Iraqis.
During the protests, security forces used tear gas and sound bombs to try to repel the demonstrators. However, police backed off as the number of protesters swelled. By late afternoon, the Ministry of Health stated that about 125 people were injured in the violence, including 100 protesters and 25 members of the security forces.
Not so far from Iraq to Iran, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi surveyed the damage on Saturday from the deadly floods and landslides which have killed at least 53 people. Raisi traveled alongside representatives from the Iranian Red Crescent Society to the flooded city of Feiruzkov, east of the Iranian capital of Tehran. The floods have affected some 400 towns and villages in 18 of Iran's 31 provinces, closing many highways, and rescuers continue to search for the missing. The governor of the Crimean Peninsula claimed that Russian Black Sea Fleet headquarters in Sevastopol was attacked by Ukraine. The attack took place on Russia's Navy Day. The governor of the peninsula added that all celebrations have been cancelled for safety reasons. The Russian Federation, or rather the Federal Security Services, have reportedly launched an investigation over the incident. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called Saturday for the evacuation of eastern Donetsk province. Hundreds of thousands of people, including children and the elderly, remain in the combat zones of the larger Donbas region, which includes Donetsk and Lugansk. The region has seen fierce fighting in the recent days, particularly in the eastern town of Bakhmut.
Hundreds of thousands of people and children are still in the areas of heavy fighting in the Donetsk region. Many people refuse to leave, so the decision to leave must be taken at some point.
In same line of thought, Ukraine has called for the United Nations and the Red Cross to be allowed to investigate the deaths of more than 50 Ukrainian prisoners of war in an attack in the occupied territory. The Red Cross said it is seeking access to the prison in order to help with evacuating the treating and the wounded. Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of attacking the camp.
Збройні сили України, Служба безпеки, Головне управління розвідки.
The Ukrainian Armed Forces, the Security Service, the main Directorate of Intelligence, and the representative of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine have issued a joint statement to the United Nations and the Red Cross as guarantors of these agreements concerning defenders of Azovstal. Now, these guarantors must react. They must protect the lives of hundreds of Ukrainian prisoners of war.
Визнання Росії державою спонсором тероризму.
In the same story, the families of Ukrainian prisoners of war being held in jail in Donetsk that was bombed said that they are worried for the news. The prisoners include members of the Azov battalion who were trapped in the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. Miriam Zian on What's Follow.
After the destruction of a prison in Yelenovka south of Donetsk, angry relatives blamed Russia for the killing of Ukrainian prisoners of war. The facility housed hundreds of Ukrainian prisoners, mainly members of the Azovstal regiment who surrendered in Mariupol in May. Kiev and Moscow have been accusing each other of responsibility over the missile strike or explosion on Friday that destroyed the prison building. The relatives gathered in Kiev and demanded justice for the loved ones.
How dare they humiliate them? They were waiting for their return, but they were killed. How is this possible? Russians killed our children. They killed everyone. They are children. They are not guilty of anything. They just were defending their country. They were ordered to surrender.
Though some of the families believed their loved ones had survived, others were desperately waiting for news.
They surrendered with the hope to return home. Now they might lose their hope, as they understand that every night could be their last. That's why I'm here. I can't just sit around and rest if my relative and many others are still there.
Russia said that Ukraine struck with US-made HIMARS rockets, killing 40 Ukrainian POWs and wounding 75 in order to deter Ukrainian forces who might be considering surrendering.
As a result of deliberate HIMARS missile strike on July 29th on a pre-trial detention facility near the settlement of Olenivka, Kiev regime killed or wounded the majority of 193 Ukrainian prisoners of war who were held there. As of morning, July 30th, 50 Ukrainians were killed in the missile strike.
The Russian Defense Ministry announced it had invited independent experts from the UN and the Red Cross to investigate the shelling of the detention center. However, Ukraine blames Russia for the strike and alleged Moscow of doing so to cover its mistreatment of POWs. Meanwhile, Ukraine's backers in Washington did not rush to blame the bombing on Moscow. Both sides said the assault was premeditated with the aim of covering up atrocities. However, neither claim could be independently verified.
17 ships ready to move goods from ports in Odessa. A total of 580 tons of grain will be exported for the first time since the start of the Russia-Ukraine conflict after weeks Turkey and the United Nations breakthrough agreement. Hussein Burkan.
President Volodymyr Zelensky visited one of Ukraine's main Black Sea ports in Odessa region. On Friday, a week after a deal was struck with Russia, Turkey and the United Nations to create safe corridors for ships to export grains that have been trapped in the country since the start of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine.
The first vessel, the first ship, is being loaded since the beginning of the war. This is a Turkish ship, and I am standing in its background. This indicates that the port has started working. The most important thing for us is that the port and people work. You see that many people, I will say frankly, that everyone is happy, that they went to work and have a job, that the process has started.
As the Battle of Donbass continue, Russia and Ukraine accused each other Friday of shelling a prison in a separatist region of eastern Ukraine, an attack that reportedly killed dozens of Ukrainian military prisoners who were captured after the fall of the southern port city in May. Kyiv called for the United Nations and the Red Cross to be allowed to investigate the deaths of the Ukrainian prisoners of war and called for Russia to be recognized as a state sponsor of terrorism.
I would add for myself that there should be a clear legal recognition of Russia as state sponsoring terrorism. I am especially turning to the United States of America. A decision is needed. It is needed now. Russia has proven by numerous terrorist acts that it is the largest source of terrorism in today's world. This is a fact.
The attack was condemned by European Union's Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell on Friday, calling for a stop for the atrocities committed by the Russian armed forces. As the Moscow-installed military administration ruling confirmed their plans of holding a referendum on joining Russia and Ukraine's Kherson region, the UK Ministry of Defense, in its daily intelligence report, claimed that the referendum would be conducted by autumn 2022. It's worth recalling that Kherson, an important port on the Black Sea, has been fully under Russian control since early March, just weeks after Moscow launched its special military operation.
The Russian gas giant Gazprom said on Saturday that it has stopped deliveries to Latvia, saying that the Baltic nation has violated the terms of gas extraction. Latvia refused to comply with Moscow's ruble payment demanded, which insists that the European countries switch to paying for gas for ruble. In the same context, Gazprom Deputy CEO Vitaly Merkulov said Siemens failed to return the Nord Stream gas turbine to Russia on the time after a mandatory repair.
The time between overhauls for Siemens engines is 25,000 hours. After that, a mandatory overhaul in the factory is required. In December last year, Siemens engine number 073 was delivered to a factory in Canada for repair. We expected to get it back in May. This engine has not returned to Russia so far, due to anti-Russian sanctions and without the consent of Gazprom. It was sent from Canada not to Russia, but to Germany.
To a different matter now, President Joe Biden tested positive for COVID-19 again, in what the White House physician described as a rebound instance found in a tiny number of patients using the antiviral medicine Paxlovid. White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre said that Biden is asymptomatic, feeling fine, and working in isolation from the residence to protect others. The 79-year-old president issued a video statement on Saturday reassuring his people.
Joe Biden here, tested positive this morning. Going to be working from home for the next couple of days. And feeling fine, everything's good, but Command and I got a lot of work to do.
China said it was conducting military exercises off its coast opposite Taiwan after warning Speaker Nancy Pelosi of the U.S. House of Representatives to scrap possible plans to visit the island democracy, which Beijing claims as part of its territory. Nabil Khazini on What Follow.
Chinese air patrols in the sky and Taiwanese military exercises on the ground. The full landscape hints of a mounting tension in the region. For China, the cause comes from another continent.
I don't ever talk about my travel because, as some of you know, it's a security issue.
The third in line to the US presidency, Nancy Pelosi, who has not publicly announced her plans, will be on a possible visit to Taiwan. But Beijing firmly objects this highest-ranked US official to visit the peninsula since 1997 and says will not occur without consequences.
If House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi visits Taiwan, it will seriously violate the One China principle and the provisions of the three joint communiques, severely undermine China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, gravely impact the foundation of China-US relations, and send a seriously wrong signal to Taiwan independence forces. China firmly opposes this.
Last week, Xi Jinping and Joe Biden held a lengthy and candid discussion about Taiwan, an issue proved among the most controversial. A phone call where the Chinese leader warned his US counterpart against playing with fire over Taiwan. The purpose of the trip, which has further strained already fragile China-US ties, is to reaffirm America's strong and unshakable commitment to its allies and friends in the region. However, the Chinese government opposes all foreign visits or any expressions of support for Taiwan, and speculation mounted about China's potential diplomatic and military responses to the situation.
Regarding Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, China will definitely give a severe response. China will punish Taiwan, but I think there will be no military action during Pelosi's visit.
China says Taiwan is part of its territory and vowed it would act strongly and take countermeasures in response to a Pelosi visit.
Firefighters from several countries have joined forces to battle a fire in National Park in the northern Czech Republic that has spread to the state of Saxony in neighboring Germany. The fire in Bohemian Switzerland Park broke out on Sunday and was mostly contained before windy weather caused it to spread again on Monday afternoon and overnight. Despite their efforts, firefighters said that the fire has spread from 30 hectares earlier Tuesday to 1,000 hectares.
There are about 83 fire service units operating here at the moment, about 500 people who have huge problems just trying to move in this complicated terrain. We have here 4 helicopters and 2 airplanes. Another 2 helicopters should come in 1 hour, and we will have 6 helicopters and 2 airplanes.
The death toll from the devastating floods in Kentucky has risen to 25 and is expected to rise further. As some areas of Kentucky received some 20 centimeters of rain in 24 hours, and in places, the waters of the river suddenly rose several meters before emerging from their beds, and emergency services and residents continued to search for survivors.
A massive number of homes, businesses and roadways were covered by water Thursday morning after flooding unleashed by torrential rainfall hit parts of Kentucky. 16 people, including 6 children, died in eastern Kentucky, and authorities warned that more fatalities are expected.
We have now lost at least 15 Kentuckians, though that number is going to grow. It'll probably more than double. We know some of the lost will include children. We may have even lost entire families.
Kentucky's governor signed a state of emergency allowing the National Guard to utilize trucks and helicopters to help rescue Kentuckians trapped by high water. The governor described the disaster as one of the worst.
I've seen a lot. I've certainly done 3+ flights and or tours over flooded areas. This is by far the worst.
According to the National Weather Service, heavy rains are expected to continue in central and eastern Kentucky. The floods mark the second major national disaster to strike Kentucky in 7 months, following a swarm of tornadoes that claimed nearly 80 lives last December. And as the world warms, scientists expect more frequent and intense downpours. However, no one has done the specific studies needed to attribute these storms to climate change yet.
The Algerian news agency denied that there had been any restoring of commercial relations with Madrid. The agency published a statement confirming that the allegations currently being circulated by some media outlets about the Algerian alleged decline in trade relations with Spain are false allegations that were not issued by any official authority. Energy and Mines Minister Mohammed Arqab confirmed on Saturday 19 November that Garj iron mine will allow to production of 2 to 3 million tons of iron per year in the first phase, then 40 to 50 million tons in the following one.
Algeria is effectively embarking on the exploitation of the country's largest iron ore mines, Garj located in the far southwest of the country after 70 years of discovery. Garj reserves estimated at 3 billion tons that can be exploited commercially and industrially.
We have reached this stage after several years of work and studies in the largest international laboratories. We have made it possible to identify products which are remarkable at national and international level, including iron concentrate, iron pellets, and semi-finished products such as pellets.
The mines alone will enable Algeria to take an iron industry lead in the African continent and make it among the most important suppliers of the iron globally. It will also allow Algeria to take an important step to diversify its national economy apart from hydrocarbons. By completing the project's development phases, the iron giant is expected to bring more than $10 billion in annual revenues to Algeria, up to $16 billion. Garj will have a production capacity of 4 million tons per year during the first partial phase, which extends to up to 2024, with the full maturity of the structured project to be reached by 2025.
The structural project's production goes through several phases from 2022 to 2040. The first phase will have a production of 2 to 3 million tons a year, and it will be transported by land to Bashar, in which a railway train project is being studied and conducted at the beginning of 2023.
The project aims to provide more than 3,000 direct jobs and more than 205,000 indirect jobs in various structures, basal enterprises, and attached services.
Spain reported its second monkeypox-related death on Saturday in what it is thought to be Europe's second death from the disease in the current outbreak to date. There have been more than 22,000 monkeypox cases reported in nearly 80 countries since May, with about 75 suspected deaths in Africa, mostly in Nigeria and Congo. In the US, New York declared that monkeypox a public health emergency, saying the city is the epicenter of the state's outbreak. On Saturday, hundreds of people from the local Nigerian community took the streets of Savannah of Marsh in Marsh region to demand justice after the death of a 29 Nigerian street trader who is a migrant in the city. The video of the attack, which has been widely circulated on Italian news websites and social media, has shocked the community, with many highlighting the indifference of witnesses. However, circumstances of the incidents are still unclear. Following a busy weekend of rescue operation, more than 400 migrants on board German charity rescue ship Sea-Watch 3 were waiting to be assigned a port of safety last Wednesday. More than 37,000 asylum seekers and migrants have landed in Italy since the start of 2022. A group of 141 Haitian migrants were being tended by the Red Cross medics Saturday in the southeastern Cuba after their boat ran aground near their coast. Local media reported that some 22 minors and several pregnant women are among the migrants. The head of the Red Cross operations in Cienfuegos claimed that they had been at sea for 8 days with limited food since the departure from the Haitian island Qanat. In a major Twitter by the US space condemned and the video posted by social media users in Malaysia that showed what appeared to be the rocket debris of massive Chinese rocket that was descending uncontrollably back to Earth and re-entered the atmosphere over the Indian Ocean on Saturday. NASA said that Beijing had not shared the specific trajectory information needed to know where possible debris might fall. "600 flamingo chicks were fitted with identity rings after being guided on Saturday by hundreds of volunteers at Fuente de Piedra, a Ghana natural reserve in southern Spain, one of Europe's greatest colony of flamingos.
The climate this year has been dry, however we had a rainy spring which allowed flamingos to reproduce successfully, as we are seeing now.
And with this news, we reach the end of our news, and now let's have a reminder for our main top stories. Supporters of our powerful Iraqi cleric Muqtada Sadr occupied the country parliament on Saturday with no plan to leave, deepening a months-long political standoff. Why dozens of people have been dying and going missing in ongoing flash floods across Iran. Survivors confronted President Ibrahim Raisi as he was visiting affected areas. In the face of Russian advance, Ukrainian president issued the order for mandatory evacuation of troops and civilians in Donetsk, the front line in the east of the Slavic country. A Chinese booster rocket made an uncontrolled return to Earth on Saturday, leading US officials to chide Beijing for not sharing information about the potentially hazardous object's descent. That's all what we have for now. To follow our L24 news, the special social network over Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Bye for now.